countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Grab your popcorn. It is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop Podcast.
That's right. We are opening up the shop to newbies to help them find their way underneath this big comic book tent and maybe understand why this used to be a big thing in the 90s.
That's right. We're keeping the lights on for the oldies who remember the 90s, who remember lining up for all those brand new Image books, who remember lying to themselves and saying, no, these are good comic books. They're awesome.
Chad's still living that lie.
Hell yeah.
In case. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith and Jay Scott, as always, plus the wonderful Mikey Wood for the kickoff of an annual event here at the Last Comic Shop. That is right. It is Movie Mayhem. That's our time of every single year where we line up comic books and movies with those same characters. And boy, we've got an awesome lineup for you this May. 4 episodes coming out over the next couple of weeks. Some great books in there like Go-Go 13 and The Crow and Batman 89 for the 35th anniversary. But on today's show, Chad, this was your pick. Your pick for Movie Mayhem 2024. What movie comic book are we doing this week?
So originally I wanted to get our friends at the Worst Movie Ever podcast involved. This was on their wish list, but they couldn't make it, unfortunately. We are going to do the Spawn Director's Cut, along with the first 14 issues of the Spawn comic book by Todd McFarlane and many others, published from Image Comics back in 1990.
Because if people were lining up for the comic book, no one was lining up for the movie.
Oh.
All right. Well, we've got some strong opinions on the movie. It does star Black Dynamite. I do love Michael Jai White. I mean, he's awesome. You chew that scenery. I love it. But we'll get to that movie review later on. We have a comic book, though, to review. And Spawn is a comic book character that a lot of folks know. But I do want to point out that this harkens back to a previous episode of the Last Comic Shop where we started talking about the top 10 floppy comic books. Now, J.A., would you mind refreshing everybody's memory out there as to who is on that list?
Okay, so this is for periodical single-issue floppy comics, top 10 by cumulative sales. So not like a single issue that sold the most, but over the entire run of said comic book, approximate sales for that comic book. Number 1, coming in with 600 million approximate sales, is Superman. Started in 1938 and has been published over 18,700 issues at this point. Number 2, Batman. Number 3, Spider-Man. Number 4, X-Men at 1,200 issues with 260 million approximate sales. So after Superman and Batman, you start to see a steep drop-off in approximate sales. Captain America follows. After that, we have Diabolique, and then Spawn. So everything up to Spawn was either from the Golden Age or the Silver Age. Spawn is the only modern comic book in the top 10, and the one with the least amount of issues, with 150 million in approximate sales.
Let me jump in. I was just going to say the Spawn main comic has just gone over 300. I think of those books, Spawn had proven to be the most popular. Rob Liefeld's Youngblood came out. He had like 2 issues out before anybody else came along. But Spawn was able to keep a relatively reasonable schedule, and so they were able to maintain their audience, whereas a lot of the other Image folks, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Will Sporcasio, who just didn't show up for 2 years, they all struggled to maintain consistency, whereas that was one thing that Todd McFarlane, for the most part, he was one of the more consistent, and they loved Todd McFarlane. He was so popular, Marvel gave him his own Spider-Man book, and then there had been a break, and people hadn't had McFarlane art, which was all the buzz. And so, yeah, it came out of the gate hot, and it stayed that way for a good long time.
Well, who else worked on the first 14 issues of Spawn with Todd McFarlane, Chad?
So Todd McFarlane really did the lion's share of the load in terms of storytelling. He wrote the books. He came up with the pencils, did the inks. He was joined by Ole Optics, including Steve Oliff and Ruben Rude on colors, Tom Warzakowski on letters. And then after a couple issues, he started to realize that people were knocking Image because while the art on your Youngbloods and your Wildcats and your Spawns and your Savage Dragons, was out of the park, then all the other companies were trying to catch up to the art styles and the coloring and the production levels of Image. All those things were fantastic. The stories were a little bit lacking. So starting in issue 8, McFarlane brought in Alan Moore. Issue 9, he brought in Neil Gaiman. He may or may not regret at this point. Issue 10 was written by Dave Sim. That was not included in our collection that we read. We read Volume 1 and Volume 2. They excluded the Dave Sim Cerebus issue. And then issue 11 was written by Frank Miller before going back to Todd McFarlane on writing duties, which he would maintain in some way, shape, or form throughout the first 100 issues, at least writing Spawn. Eventually, he would cede penciling to Greg Capullo and a couple others.
Greg Capullo, very much a Todd McFarlane light.
Well, I will say this. Todd McFarlane with Spawn was trying to create a character like Batman, Spider-Man, the Fantastic
Punisher.
Yeah.
He
should have created a character like something original.
What I was trying to say was he was trying to create a character that would be around well after he was gone. He could start something and then other people could pick up that character and run with it, like all of the characters that he worked on over the years, whether it was his work on Batman or Spider-Man or anything like that. So that's what he was trying to do with Spawn. Kind of a noble aspiration, maybe, to create a legendary character like that. But, Mikey, did he succeed with these first 14 issues?
Oh, man.
10-cent synopsis.
You go right to... 10-cent synopsis. What is Spawn about? It's the Crow, but with a cape. It really is. It's like super military dude Al Simmons is murdered by one of his colleagues. He makes a deal with the devil, Malbolgia, and comes back in Union Jack's costume with Spider-Man's mask and Doctor Strange's cape and starts killing people in alleyways. And I mean, it's a supernatural kind of, and like, I get what he was going for. And, it did go further and further into stories. There were spawns prior to Al and things like that. So, you could see a little bit of progress in Todd's writing throughout this big patch.
I won't vouch for that, but I will say, not for nothing, Spawn has lasted. It's still currently being published. There are, several Spawn devotees out there that will sing the praises of the book. As much as, and I can hear it a little bit, and I know we're in for a rough landing here on this show. And maybe deservedly so, maybe not. But there are a lot of people out there where Spawn is their jam. It definitely scratches an itch that a lot of people have out there.
My thing is, I think it's generational. I really do. I think, first of all, people had no other choice but to read the Image books that were coming out. It was shoved down your throat. Like Wizard had been out for about a year and Wizard was shoving it down your throat. The idea of these people leaving their careers to start new comics. And, there was the famous Rob Liefeld Jeans commercial, which put him on the map. And, McFarlane was there for the beginning of Venom, and he had the adjective-less Spider-Man, which I bought every issue.
Let me hop in, Mikey, before I toss it to J.A. In 1990, I'm 10 years old. There were two other kids in my neighborhood that read comic books. We all kind of settled in, and we're like, all right, well, Rocky's going to be the Todd McFarlane guy. Chris gets to be the Jim Lee aficionado, and I picked Rob Liefeld. But these were the hottest of the hottest artists in comic books at that time, and it really was a shift away from that 80s Jim Shooter style, where, for better or for worse, and a lot of people will say for better, comics were being redefined by their art, and it pulled a ton of people in.
It was also very aspirational because it was the whole idea that here are these guys leaving the big corporate behemoths to start something on their own. So anyone who ever drew comics on the back of their notebook or stuck in math class and instead of studying their algebra was sketching out a superhero of their own creation, it spoke to them. I thought the idea that, hey, they were super rich and they were super famous and they had a lot of pull behind them because their names were well known, but they were going out and they were doing something on their own, and this was their own characters. This wasn't playing with toys that had been made 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. This was something that it had that freshness to it.
Well, the problem, though, as a reader, I was a slightly older reader. I was 19 at the time, right? All of their fresh new toys were just the other toys in different costumes. That's all they were. Image is a huge company that produces some incredible comics now. So for that alone, they should really be applauded for starting this, because they really do put out nowadays, and for the past 20-something years, have put out some of the best, most creative creator-owned comics that are out there. But at the time, there's no wonder that 12, 13-year-old kids latched onto it as well as they did, because it was written by a 12 or 13-year-old kid. It was like, it would be awesome if he had chains and a skull. Like, it was like every kind of kid drawing what they think is super awesome in a notebook.
Yeah, but that was the market at the time. Comics
and it
were
worked,
still written for 13-year-old kids, man.
Yeah.
Andy, I know you've been waiting patiently. What's your take on this whole?
I think, to your point, it was style over substance. I think, honestly, that's what ultimately tripped up Image in those early years, not being able to put out books timely and stuff. There was a thing to be said for Jim Shooter and his ability to keep a lot of those folks tight on books and tight on schedules, and that, there was going to be books out every single month. And once they got out into the greener pastures there, all of a sudden, the realities of writing a monthly book like that started to set in. But I will say this, too. I feel like one of the best issues of the first 14 that we read is issue 9. That was the one that was written by Neil Gaiman. It starts a lot of an internal mythology of this heaven versus hell war that's going on, which is actually a pretty fascinating concept, to be very honest. It introduces Angela on the one side. It introduces the fact that there were other Spawns before Al Simmons on the other side. So that's really good. But it reinforced to me this notion that I had way back when we read Deadpool Batter Blow, which was, these guys are really great artists. And when teamed with writers of the same caliber, all of a sudden you get really good work. I feel like a lot of the folks came over, they had some ideas, they didn't really know how to generate them into storylines that really stuck. Gosh, later on you have like, it wasn't a church, it was a chapel. Chapel's here, and we got to start the shared universe with Youngblood. And I was just like, really?
We will knock the Image guys around for not being the best writers, but they were good storytellers. And I do think that Todd McFarlane was among those trying to plant the seeds of the whole connected universe thing. And that was one of the best parts of Marvel Comics. The fact that it was a shared universe, that you'd have that panel of Thor flying by past Spider-Man. You would see in each issue, McFarlane goes out of his way to reference some other Image comic or some other Image situation. Whether it's the early mentions of Youngblood or if it's Savage Dragon showing up on the TVs. And then later on, he starts jabbing Liefeld with the whole Bedrock is being sued by Hanna-Barbera in one of his news reports, bringing up stuff that was happening in real life.
And then they start singing the Yabba Dabba Doo Flintstones theme. I did like that. I want to know, though, they're cool images, right? But I want to know where anybody thinks some of these guns come from, right? Have you ever really seen a gun that looks like that?
I'll tell you where the guns come from. It's the same place where Cable buys his guns from, and it's a very real place.
That's right. It's
Bishop as well.
They're enormous guns, barrels the size of
that's government issue hardware, man. They've got experimental tech.
It's all rounded over. That. No, there is no military hardware out there that looks like. I'm sorry.
That you know of.
Exactly. I beg to differ. Enough for Cable, it's good enough for Spawn.
I knew McFarlane from Infinity Inc. He was on Infinity Inc. in the like the 80s, and then he took over Batman Year 2 after Alan Davis left over a decision to have Batman holding a gun on a cover, I think is what it was. But he took over, and I remember being really, really disappointed that he took over because I love Alan Davis so much. But when Adjectiveless Spider-Man came out, it was a big deal. It was huge. So I jumped on that, and I remember buying every issue of that first storyline during a train ride down to Florida, because every time we would get off for a little rest stop, they would have a different issue at a newsstand, and I was just getting them. And I remember reading that, and I remember thinking how much I saw a progression in like his artwork on Infinity Inc. is entirely different from his artwork on Spider-Man. That first issue of Spawn, when I was reading it, it felt like a greatest hits book, because it was like, okay, there's a Batman panel, and there are the webs from Spider-Man, and there are and that's why it didn't hit me, and it didn't land, and it feel really bad because I sound like such a grumpy Gus, but it just didn't. Honestly,
listen, Mikey, 10-year-old Chad Smith, his comics that he was making all had the doom sound effect from the first Spider-Man, and also the click whir from whenever Tim Drake was taking pictures in Batman and Batman Year 3. Those were littered in my handmade comics, and so I see those illusions. I see the spider webs in there and the chains and all that stuff. And I don't see it in the way that you do, which your way is probably a lot more reasonable. But I see that stuff as value added. Whenever I see those spider webs, I'm like, look, there's the spider webs again.
It goes back to my thing where I think, and comics in general are like this, where you are in your life when you read something makes a big difference what you love and what you hold close. At that time in my life, I was reading Sandman and Hellblazer and Doom Patrol and these comics to me at the time and to me now had just sort of an immaturity to them that I didn't gel with. And that's not me trying to be elitist and snobby, even though it sounds like I am. It's just they were just not what I was looking for at the time. Reading them now, you have to give credit to, like, Eric Larson has been doing Savage Dragon consistently every single month since then. Like, he has not stopped.
And he didn't go crazy either. Some other folks may have went crazy while they were writing a book for 300 issues, but he didn't.
It's amazing. It is. You got to give him credit for that.
Speaking of immaturity, one of your favorite issues, J.A., I think was the one done by Alan Moore, right?
I laughed at it. I thought the writing on that was very, very good. Go figure. And it was a nice palate cleanser, breath of fresh air after reading through the first trade, which was all Todd McFarlane. Yeah. But basically, it's a story where Alan Moore's sort of going through the levels of hell with one of these guys that Spawn killed earlier on. And there's this woman. She's dressed for the pubescent male teenager. She's got a safari jacket that's split down to her navel, barely cover. I mean,
it's dental floss. It really is.
Dental floss. It's covering what it needs to cover to get a PG-13 rating, and that's about it. And she looks like she's straight off the cover of Playboy. And that's like 90s Playboy, so everything is,
Yeah.
I had 2 copies of that. One that I kept in a bag, and one I kept under the mattress.
No, we don't know.
Any case, but no, it was a good issue, though. Especially with the fact that they take this Billy Kincaid character, which was kind of like, you guys remember the second story arc in Adjective Spider-Man Perceptions with Wendigo and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Wasn't that also about a person preying on small children? And I thought it was very, very disturbing because, to Chad's point, the market for these books were like 12, 13-year-olds. It was icky. So I'm glad that they used that Billy Kincaid and they showed him going through levels of hell and getting his just desserts. Because that was the ickiest issue of all 14 that we read. I think it was issue 5. I just hated it.
And on that when McFarlane was doing his Adjective of Spider-Man, boy, I loved the art. But even I at that time was like, these stories don't fit Spider-Man. That stuff is too dark and
it's very dark. Yes, it's seriously, it's Punisher meets Spider-Man meets Batman, which is Spawn.
But on Spawn it fits. And to go back, I remember years ago on a different show, we looked into a bunch of the early Savage Dragon stuff, and I remember just being so harsh on it. Boy, he really could have used an editor. because parts of the story I couldn't tell if I read things out of order or what. The nice part about Spawn, Todd McFarlane was not trying that hard. These are all pretty straightforward, like dark and gruesome stories.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of nuance here, which you don't come to Spawn for nuance.
Although
it is what it is.
I want to throw out, there was one issue which I just didn't get. This gang war between these two giant bruisers in like cyber gear, and they were
overkill.
Yes,
Overkill.
Not
geeks
overkill,
versus the
overt.
nerds.
Overt.
Well, you know where he came from, right?
I don't. That's what I was hoping, because I was like, this has to be a thing, right? This has to be a thing, but I'm not catching it. So educate me.
Okay. So you may or may not remember where Stanley would interview current comic book luminaries. And so he did one with Rob Liefeld. He did one with Todd McFarlane. And Liefeld and McFarlane actually co-created Overkill on one of these VHS taped interviews that they would sell you for a couple of bucks. And that originally he was Overkill. I wonder if there was somebody, some copyright issue that made them add the T. But they're going through, they're making like, yeah, he needs cyborg arms, he needs spikes, he needs a robotic eye. And they're just drawing all this stuff in as they go. Yeah. You can watch it happen.
All right. Well, we got to get to this movie review, so let's get to ratings of Spawn. We do.
We don't. We really don't.
We do. We owe it to them. We owe it to our fans.
As a warning, I suppose.
J.A., will you give us the 1 out of 4 scale for the first 14 issues of Spawn?
1 out of 4 hell spawns.
Oh, because everybody's been kind of saying that it's Spider-Man beats Batman meets a Punisher, right? I beg to differ. I mean, I get the Spider-Man hat, but I'm going, it's Venom meets Batman meets Punisher, because that's what it is. Like, we forgot that Hell Spawn armor is actually just a symbiote. Whatever.
Don't forget Ghost Rider. He had all the chains and skulls.
Yeah. The book is everything that was the 90s filtered down into its purest form,
but no pouches.
Oh, so there were pouches.
Yeah, he had pouches.
I
think with the guns, the big guns, he had.
He had pouches too from the beginning. There are pouches.
Yeah, I wasn't totally anti-Image. I read the Max and I read Shaman's Tears all the way to the end. So just to say.
That Max cartoon, man, that was the best.
That was the best.
Let's start off with you, Mikey. You've been the most critical of these issues of Spawn. 1 out of 4 Hell Spawn. What are you giving it?
I'll give it a 1 because there were occasionally, there was the moment where they, is it Billy Kincaid or is it the hockey player guy?
Yeah, Tony Twist is the hockey player.
With the ice cream truck where it was like at the end where he's like, I screamed, you screamed, and screamed, and screamed, and screamed. That was cool. That was really cool. But it's just not my thing. It's not, and I did. You wanted us to read 14 issues. I made it about 5.5. And then I bounced forward and read. I do own an issue of Spawn. I own the Cerebus issue because it's in my Cerebus stuff. That's number 10, where Dave Sim came in and wrote it. And that's an interesting thing about comics and where they are. And I don't know if Todd McFarlane realized that he was being made fun of in that. I don't know if he did. I don't know if he's sharp enough to realize that. But yeah, so it's just not my.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, J.A., you're up next.
I'm going to give it a 2. I can't rate it as low as Mikey, but I think it grows, and those issues that were co-written or written with guest writers, you saw the potential. So I don't want to knock it too much because I really enjoyed those issues. I really enjoyed issue 9. It actually informed my recommendation for this week. I enjoyed the Alan Moore issue, the Frank Miller issue. So I thought when he got competent scripting, his sort of overall plot is good. I just think his dialogue lets him down from time to time. The art, it's subjective. Some people will love it. Some people will not. I have a problem with Todd McFarlane's noses. The way he draws noses. He has 2 types of noses. It's either the big, long, bulbous nose or this little, short, perky nose. I was like, oh, this is nose A and that guy's nose B. But for what it did to the industry, what it did to help establish Image, I don't think you can discount it. I mean, they made a whole movie based on the popularity of the comic book. And, Hollywood, they're not want to spend money on something they don't think will make money. Now, we're going to talk about that movie next and find out why it made no money. But They didn't know that going into it.
But it wasn't just a movie. It was a movie, and it was an HBO cartoon that ran for 3 seasons. It was a toy line that exploded into other things.
Mhm.
Like, it was a cultural wave.
Yeah, so I give it 2 Hellspawns. Now, I would start with Volume 2. You don't need to know a lot about Volume 1, with the exception of that Billy Kincaid story, I guess, because that happens in Volume 1, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you won't understand that as much. But then again, I don't think you need Volume 1 to appreciate Volume 2. And Volume 2 has the guest writers, with the exception of the Cerebus issue, because obviously there's some legal wranglings in that one, which we'll also get into in my recommendation.
Oh. All right, Chad, you're a big 90s guy.
Heck yeah.
What are you rating it?
Couple of things. I'm sad we didn't get to talk about how issue 9 was the one that was written by Neil Gaiman, and how that is quote unquote one of the most expensive issues in comics, because McFarlane and Gaiman basically had a handshake deal where Todd McFarlane was like, I'll take care of you better than the big companies did. And then Neil Gaiman wanted treated with the same terms, I guess, as the big companies. And Todd McFarlane, wasn't as savvy in business and ended up pissing him off. And then there's a huge rights issue.
He wasn't paying him. So he's republishing these comics in trades and whatnot. And he wasn't paying Gaiman for the republished rights, essentially. And said, well, you were just a guest writer. I own the rights. And he's like, no. No, you don't. I should be getting 50% of all the royalties coming off of these things. It took him to court and won. And part of the court agreement, I think probably McFarlane said, well, I can't pay you all that money because I don't have all that money. This is a man that was legendary for blowing millions and millions of dollars on stupid stuff.
You have not been listening to that Robservation podcast like I've been telling you. The $3 million baseball thing was basically a promotional stunt, which he got way more than $3 million out of buying that baseball. So at one point, Todd McFarlane tried to be like, listen, I'll give you the rights to Miracle Man that he didn't own. He thought he owned. He had purchased what was left from Eclipse Comics, but through some other legal wrangling, a lot of it comes down to just not being as savvy business-wise. But at the same time, he's very savvy and, building up his toy empire. And there's just the real life stuff is just as fascinating. They're better stories than the books, to put it that way.
Yeah.
So, I'm doing my review, huh? I honestly, I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. Back when these issues were first coming out, I stuck with the McFarlane Spawn until he skipped ahead a few issues. So he had already stopped drawing them, and then he went from issue, I want to say 18 to issue 21. I was like, all right, that's enough for me.
Why did he do that?
I don't know.
That's all
I
right.
stopped at 18. But anyways, I don't know if I had like a sour taste in my mouth or what. But to see that Todd McFarlane artwork again, and to see it in an avenue where I really do think it fit. It fit what he wanted to do. And whereas I'm not the biggest horror comic guy, I did not regret going back and rereading these issues. I pulled out the Cerebus 1-2 out of the collection there to read that. And it's all about creators' rights. And it has the wall of everybody's hands sticking out like, save us, injustice, all that other stuff. I think McFarlane was swinging for bigger fences than he was going to be able to clear. But I respect it. I respect him taking his stuff and mashing it together and be like, I'm going to give the fans what they want, but in a way that's going to create something that is going to outlive. And I genuinely think he's done that. I think you're going to see Spawn franchises carry on because there is that devoted fan base. There is an audience for this. Is that audience me? No, it's not. I'm a Rob Liefeld guy. So I'm going to give these I'm going to say 2.7. Because they were fun for what they were. I thought they held up better than some of those earlier Savage Dragon things. I don't think they're on par with Youngblood, but they did have lots of Youngblood things in there. You have the whole Chapel references, which eventually were retconned. But I liked it. I like seeing McFarlane try to build up that Image universe. I liked watching Todd McFarlane try to find his feet with these stories. And I do think, even after the guest writers, the stories got better as he went. And so I wouldn't be shocked to find out that, there's a solid run of Spawn comics in the 50s or 60s that there, some solid dark stories in there.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go a little bit lower, Chad. This is a 2. This is average comic booking. We read 14 issues. I can probably say that I liked 7 of them, which is average. I mean, that's 50-50. Oh, boy, I really hated that first Kincaid issue. Boy, that just gave me the heebie-jeebies.
But that was for
it
what
was
it
supposed
was,
to. And I do like some of his supporting cast. I like those 2 cops. Twitch and the other dude?
Sam and Twitch.
Yeah, they were fun. They were all right. They were much more interesting characters than random hobos that he was talking to most of the time. With Wanda and Terry, I didn't care about anything that was going on with his previous life. But I won't lie that I somewhat enjoyed the first 4 issues. Going back to issue 1 was a treat. I remember reading that when it was coming out on the stands. To Jay's point, 9 is a banger. 9 is an absolute banger. And 8's not too shabby either by Alan Moore. The Frank Miller one was kind of weird. I was just like, I don't know about this. But what I'll say in closing is this. I think Todd McFarlane's art is awesome. I really loved him on Amazing Spider-Man. I loved him on Batman. I loved him on a lot of things. I loved him on Spawn here. His art is really good. His ability to visually put down a story is also very good. I just feel like some of the story ideas and plot lines, no, they were kind of half-baked. And when he's teamed with somebody that can kind of fill in those blanks and give him a solid cast of characters to work with, like he was doing at the Big 2, it was better. Spider-Man was written by David Michelini. He's a great writer. And so that was why that worked so well. So have him continue to draw. It's awesome when he draws.
And I think that's not what happened. I think that's the opposite. Was he writing the Capullo ones, or was he occasionally writing it?
He was writing it and doing inks for a lot of them to keep that consistency. But I'll be honest, guys. The Alan Moore and Frank Miller issues, I didn't think they were that much better than the Todd McFarlane written issues. I think they're still just kind of coasting. But teach your own.
One thing that we may think is better or worse is the movie review of the 1997 Spawn movie, and it's coming up right after these messages.
Oh, that's worse.
You're being kind. I think we all agree that it's worse.
Hey.
BCWSupplies.com has everything a comic collector could need. Boards, bags, long boxes, and so much else for our ever so increasing collections. And you can save 10% on your total order by using promo code LCSPOD at checkout. Not only does this take 10% off BCW Supplies' already low prices, but it supports my favorite podcast, The Last Comic Shop. So get all your collecting gear at bcwsupplies.com and save 10% on your order with promo code LCSPOD at checkout. That's LCSPOD at checkout. Happy hunting!
When 6 teenagers are caught in a devastating storm, they wake up the next day with unimaginable abilities. Now the same storm that gave them their powers has awoken an ancient evil set on destroying their home and the world at large, and it's up to them to stop it. In a world without heroes, they're here to kick some ass. Read Born a Storm, a new ongoing series for free at Born a Storm Comic on Instagram. Hashtag Born a Storm.
Hellspawn fans, and we are going to take you all the way back to 1997, actually probably a few years later, because we are looking at the director's cut of the Spawn movie, provided to us by whom, J.A.? Who worked on this hellish monstrosity?
All right. Well, this came out of New Line Cinema, that classic 80s and 90s studio that produced such great films as the Friday the 13th series, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, the Evil Dead series, and the Mortal Kombat series.
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street as well.
So this Spawn, the movie, was directed by Mark Dippy on a screenplay by Alan McElroy, starring John Leguizamo was the #1 billed as the clown, Michael Jai White, became Spawn, Al Simmons. Martin Sheen, CIA Director Jason Wynn. Teresa Randall played Wanda Blake. Nicole Williamson, in his final role, was Nicholas Cogliostro. D.B. Sweeney as CIA agent Terry Fitzgerald, and Al Simmons' best friend, who then marries his wife. That's what all best friends do.
Really weird.
Yeah. Melinda Clark as a throwaway CIA agent who gets killed. And Michael Hughes, fresh off of his kindergarten cop run, was the boy.
The littlest hobo.
Yeah.
Listen, you are leaving out the biggest name on this picture. He is combined with PlayStation 1 style graphics. But you have Frank Welker as the voice of Malaboja.
All right.
Mispronounced my entire life. Malaboja.
Man.
Malaboja. And those graphics were just... Why didn't they go stop motion?
He looked like a Muppet, right? He was like...
But he doesn't move his mouth.
Almost bad Muppet, like a cheap one that you got at the gas station.
And he just, all he did was Dr. Claw's voice from Inspector Gadget.
Just wonderful stuff.
All right. So, Andy, you are in charge, sir. Now that we have who was responsible. What the hell was Spawn?
Wow. Well, it's very similar to the comic book in some ways, that it's the story of Al Simmons, who is like a CIA operative, special forces commando that works for Jason Wynn, who runs some sort of shadowy quasi-governmental agency that does like political assassinations and kind of MI6 kind of stuffy things. And long story short, he wants to get out of the biz because he's like, oh, you guys are killing like innocent people, and Jason Wynn is like working with hell to bring about the end of the world. And like the clown shows up, the Violator, and he's like, I want Al Simmons to be the leader of the Hell Army. That's what Malaboja wants. Jason Wynn's like, I see an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. We will kill Al Simmons and send him to hell, where he's sure to team up with the devil and come back and rain shit on everything, which he does. Like he comes back, and at that point, the movie goes off the rails. Because I won't lie, I actually enjoyed it for like the first 15 minutes. Michael Jai White was just like James Bond. And, you know, the girls sitting on couches with, like, guns in their panties. And I was just like, this is neat. This is like, they're just chewing scenery. It's awesome. But then, like, John Leguizamo comes in, and there's a lot of bathroom humor. And eventually they fight with a lot of big guns. And he goes to hell with Cogsomostro or whatever.
Cogliostro.
Whatever. Does anybody care what his name is?
Merlin from Excalibur.
He
was created by Neil Gaiman.
He was.
Spawn got sued. Anyway, go ahead.
And he becomes one of the big villains in Spawn eventually, or big antagonists or whatever. Long story short,
he turns out to be Kane.
They fight through hell. They come back. They kill John Leguizamo, and then he stands on the top of rooftops with lots of rats and a cape, which I think they blew the entire CGI budget just on that cape. Like
that's the one thing I like about the movie, is because the cape grows and shrinks and stuff like that on him, which is a really great way of explaining how the hell he gets around with the cape. Because in the comic, it's absolutely absurd how big his cape is.
Right.
Like, it's ridiculous. Like, he'd just be dragging it through the dirt like all day, no matter where he goes.
And you know what? I didn't mind the points when he used the cape to, like, I don't know, shield his motorcycle during that random chase.
Yeah, there was some interesting stuff.
But I that's my initial thought, guys. For the first 15 minutes, I was on board. I had a couple of beers, and Black Dynamite, Michael Jai White, who I love. If you haven't watched Black Dynamite, it is a great, great movie. He was there with Martin Sheen with his comb-in.
Just for Men.
Just for Men beard.
Who did Martin Sheen owe money to that he did this movie?
Oh, he did it for cash.
Like,
you know why? Because their job is to act in movies. It's a job.
Yeah. I guess.
Anthony Hopkins was in a Transformers movie.
He was, and that whole movie, like, I don't think he knew what the hell he was doing there. Like, if you look,
you know what? He was getting a paycheck because their job is to be in
Well,
movies.
and all I kept on seeing was Charlie Sheen. I don't know why. I was just like, you look like your son now. And
Oh, don't forget the voice. He really was trying for scenery chewing with that voice.
he was hamming it.
Jason Wynn.
And then John Leguizamo comes in and pulls dirty underwear out of his pants, and I'm just like, all right, I'm done. I'm done with this movie. You lost me. I mean, J.A., did you get that far or no?
I had to watch it in stages. How this thing got greenlit.
Okay.
I mean, is this worse or better than Green Lantern? That's basically what we're talking about.
it's worse than Green Lantern. I actually like Green Lantern.
I will say this. I at least stayed awake through the whole thing on this one.
I couldn't get past the really atrocious CGI. And it was ILM. But apparently, like a third of the movie's budget, which was like $40 million, went to special effects. Most of it for the Violator, which was done all right, and the Cape, which was all right. But all the scenes in hell, I thought, I don't know if that was a different team. It always took me out of it. And I felt kind of bad for Michael Jai White. He's got to do the entire movie. Yes, they didn't put his mask on that much, so at least you could see him moving his face. But he's like in this full face prosthetic because he's been burned. So the entire movie, you're not going to get a lot of, well, maybe you don't get a lot of emoting out of Michael Jai White as an actor anyways. I don't know. I don't know a lot of his work, but it's hard to be an actor when you're acting under all these prosthetics that you're forced to do. So it's not great. I mean, the movie, I said the budget was 40 to 45 million. It made 87 at the box office. So if you know anything about movies, that means it's pretty much a bomb because you've got to spend 40 million to produce it and then 40 million to market it. So yeah, it didn't make any money.
Honestly, I think this movie suffered and the budget ballooned up because of those special effects. I genuinely think, because I'm like Andy, the first 20 minutes where it is a bad 80s action movie, I am here for it. You know, it's cheesy, it's B-movie level, but I would have watched that movie. Like, I could see myself sitting down with, like, my uncle, and that's the kind of stuff he would watch. I could see loving it. And if this had even maybe stuck like a Trauma-style vibe with some of the special effects and used practical effects and, had it been cheesy and leaned into that B-movie stuff, I could see that working too. But this was 1996, 1997. It was a B-level movie that was trying to present as not a B-level movie when I think it should have gone the other way. The Malebolgia stuff was not any better than a PlayStation game at the time.
Mm-mm.
And it was comically bad in the director's cut as they're introducing all the credits and stuff. And they've got this hell flame spiral. And then you can see, they're playing it again. Only it's upside down. Oh,
Yeah.
there it is. Oh, no, it's backwards this time. Look out. Just reusing that same footage. And it's like, oh, you guys got to hide it better than that. And even I was hard on John Leguizamo. I don't think John Leguizamo was terrible in this. Like, he leaned into the character, and the dialogue is super cringy from a modern day perspective, but like, he was working at it. And Michael Jai White, like Andy was mentioning, he's capable of putting on great performances. And I felt bad because, after the first 15 minutes, like Jay said, he's just covered in these prosthetics. Yeah. So it's hard for him. Like, there were just a lot of things that could have been like easy story fixes. Oh, look, I spawned my magic and now my face is okay for a little bit. Now I can have my charismatic lead actor have some charisma. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we got Todd McFarlane as a hobo. What else do you want?
All right, Mikey, I think you were the one that was the most, not only of the comic, but also this movie. The stage is yours.
This was an act of cruelty, and you need to understand. This was an act of straightforward abuse from you and Chad and as a friend, I expected more from all of you. There was a big presence at the Pittsburgh Comic-Con at the time in 97 when this came out or whatever like that. So I went to go see it in the theater. This is the odd director's cut where like it's not new footage or anything like that. It's just put together.
Re-edited, yeah. They just re-edited things.
Yeah, it's just put together differently. It's still the same crap. It's just like in different piles.
They lingered on the R-ratedness of it.
I liked some things like mask forming on his face and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty cool. This reminds me of like that Man-Thing movie that Marvel put out, in the early 2000s. It harkens back to what Ian Malcolm says in the first Jurassic Park film. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, kind of thing. Like, I just don't think. But I mean, at the same time, there was the animated series, which I personally also didn't like because the voices skeezed me out. But it's a much better, I suggest checking that out as opposed to this. And the soundtrack. Oh my God, you guys didn't mention the soundtrack.
Korn, Butthole Surfers, Stabbing Westward,
but it was like
Prodigy.
They were like not duets, but like it was like Korn featuring Marilyn Manson or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah. Prodigy and Tom Morello.
Yeah,
Silverchair and Vitro, Henry Rollins and Goldie, Incubus and DJ Greyboy.
So it was like the 90s of 90, and I think that was set in motion by The Crow too. I think that was very influenced by that. So it's I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
All right. Well, we're not going to waste a lot of time on this movie then. We're just going to go ahead and get to ratings. Jade, you got a 1 out of 4 scale for this?
Bad CGI.
He seriously looked like a Muppet. His mouth wasn't moving. It was terrible.
I'll get you, Spawn.
I'm going to go first with probably the lowest rating I could. No, I gave Star Wars a 0. I'm pretty sure. This is
Star Wars.
This is a half. This is like a 0.5. I wanted to like this movie. As I mentioned before, the first 20 minutes reminded me of a really bad 80s action movie that I would have watched on USA, right?
Yeah, like something from Canon Films. Yeah.
Exactly. We were like, oh, this is awesome. And if you would have given me an entire movie just with Martin Sheen being bad guy and Michael Jai White as super spy dude and played up more of the, oh, look how sultry I would have watched it. I would have watched it and I would have loved it. But you didn't. Instead, you gave me, and the Violator kind of looked cool. He looked like this T-Rex thing, which was kind of neat or whatever. But there's a scene at the end where I think they kill the Violator or something. Jason Wynn, Martin Sheen character, who's been like the evilest dude ever, is just sitting in a corner for like what seems to be 10 minutes of screen time. I don't know what to do. I think I've earned my paycheck. I'm just going to sit here and not emote. I was just like, don't worry about Jason Wynn over there. He's just chilling, yo. That's what sums up this whole movie. That and the dirty underwear. And that hobo being beat up and eating the weird sandwich. Oh, you got to eat this gross sandwich, kid. It's just bad. 0.5. J.A.
To quote Laura Miller of Salon.com, this movie sucks. She said it's a witless exercise in reheating leftovers. So I agree with her, not with Roger Ebert, who gave it 3.5 out of 4.
Yeah. He said it was like surrealist or something.
Oh, I don't know what he was smoking that week. It's a 0. It's just, there's no redeeming qualities to it at all. Had they tried to be a bit camp and sort of lean into the badness of it, maybe, but they're too serious. They were serious about how bad the thing is. Just, I would not recommend watching this to anyone. I would be afraid that if you show this movie to someone who hasn't watched, I don't know, good luck finding that person on this earth after the MCU and the DCEU, but hasn't watched a superhero movie, this is not the one to get them started on.
No, the biggest fear is that you would show it to someone and they would like it. Yeah. That would be the worst thing.
Hey, some people did, man. Like the DVD sold. People bought it.
Oh.
All right, Chad, what are you saying?
Oh, I feel like I'm going to be generous with this one. Yeah, it was bad. It was real bad. There were fun parts. There were fun moments. There's also a lot that wasn't my humor. So I'm going to generously go with Andy and go 0.5.
Good.
That's just because you couldn't curse yourself for recommending the movie. Like, I was cursing you the whole time.
It was either this or Aquaman 2. They were equally terrible.
Oh, that one was bad,
And
too.
besides,
I liked Aquaman too.
Chad, you were on board with me. If we had a couple of
it
beers,
is action.
it was like after Silk Stockings. Like, they would have had this, and you would just been like, okay, it's 2 a.m. Whatever.
Listen, when the worst part of your movie is when Spawn shows up and it's called Spawn, that's bad.
Oh my.
All right, Mikey, let's close it out. We got recommendations.
You know, I'm going to give it a half just because, and this is the kinder, gentler me coming out finally. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. Nobody comes onto the set and is like, all right, let's make some shit. Like, nobody, unless it's a tax write-off or something a la the producers or something. And people worked hard to be on this. You know, you got to think Michael J. White sat in makeup for how many hours to do this, and so did Leguizamo. And Leguizamo was, like, I think on his knees for the majority of it or something. And, you know, the director, by the way, he went on to do such films as Frankenfish and Garfield Gets Real, Garfield's Fun Fest, Garfield's Pet Force. So he went on to do animated films, which is kind of fitting because this basically is an animated film. It really is. It's basically early CGI. So do we have to give a little bit of? So I don't know. So yeah, I'll give it a half star just because somebody sat in the theater waiting for their name to appear in the credits. You know, and I got, you know.
Look how generous, not like J.A.
J.A. said what I want to say. It's just
he did.
The nicer me is like
he said what we were all thinking. We're hoping that you're thinking about our recommendations. It's coming up right after this quick commercial break, so stay tuned for the end of the show.
You know what I think? This world we're in right now is the fairy tale. And what's really real is on the other side.
Ramsey, mechanic by day, aspiring comic book creator by night, went into the woods and tripped. He was bombarded by bizarre and mysterious glyphs that he drew into his sketch pad and onto the body of his muse, Regina.
Oh, groovy! Your art is crawling all over me.
Shit. What is going on with you?
What's going on with you? All of a sudden, you're a complete drip, baby. Maybe you need another limb to the head. Ah!
Bloom, written and created by Ted Sikora, with art by Butch Mappa.
How are you feeling, Ram Man?
You've never experienced a story so astonishing, so far out and away from the beaten path.
Where in the f*** am I?
Blast off with Bloom, the origin of a prophet. Order yours at herotomorrow.com.
All right, we're back with more of the Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for recommendations. Yes, that time of every single show where we give you other comic books that you can pick up at your local comic book shop, not other movies. Although I don't know, maybe somebody has a movie recommendation. Who knows? But long story short, pick up these other books in addition to Spawn if you're at your local comic book shop. We're going to start off with Chad Smith. It was his pick this week. We feel like palate cleanser, buddy?
Sure. I'm going to recommend a book I haven't read yet, but it's got to be better than this. So I'm going to go with Donny Cates' Venom. And the reason being is because I was at Target the other day, and they had this translucent green Venom action figure, and he has wings. And how cool is that? So I found out that happened in Donny Cates' Venom run, where Venom gets his wings. And so why not? Just like Spawn, might be style over substance, but who cares? It's going to be awesome. So Donny Cates' Venom. I think there's an omnibus out there. I'll probably be checking it out through Marvel Unlimited. But yeah, that is my recommendation for the week.
Cool. I'm going to go up next, and my recommendation is an awesome collection of some original short stories that appeared in Eerie Magazine. Yes, it is called Eerie Presents Hunter, the classic Warren Publishing Heroes Complete Adventures. All the art done by the wonderful Paul Neary, but like Spawn, this is kind of a story about a guy that is kind of half demon or whatever. At least the original one. His name's Damien Hunter. It's a post-apocalyptic story with a guy with an awesome helmet, and he fights a bunch of savages and demons and whatever. And eventually he's replaced by another guy named Karis Hunter, who has a robot with tank wheels. Anyways, you read it for the awesome art, honestly. It's classic 70s goodness with, swords and sorceries and epic in the wastelands and reclaimed magic and evil sorcerers. Super cool stuff. And you can get the entire Hunter series in an awesome hardback collection by Dark Horse Comics with a foreword by Mike Richardson, because Mike was a huge fan of the original Hunter series.
Does it conclude before they get to Fred Dwyer Hunter?
No. I know a lot of folks might have watched that with their nanas or grandmas. But no, this doesn't have the Fred Dwyer Hunter. He was still playing football at the time, I believe.
There we go.
J.A., you're up next.
I am going to recommend Angela, Asgard's Assassin. So this is the Angela from issue 9 of Spawn, because after that big legal battle between Neil Gaiman and Todd McFarlane, Gaiman got the rights to Angela, a character that had been co-created, and he took it to Marvel. And she is now in Marvel, and she's been retconned to be the sister of Thor. So in Asgard's Assassins by Kieran Gillen and Marguerite Bennett, with art by Stephanie Hans, beautiful covers, by the way, and Phil Jimenez, she's in limbo with a baby that is also her sister, who might be demonic, and she's being chased by Loki and Sif and Thor and the Warriors 3, and essentially dealing with the fact that she was raised to be an angel, which are these people that don't like Asgardians, but she's really Asgardian. So it's sort of like a retelling of the Loki story, but with Angela, and she's badass.
Awesome costume, too.
Yeah, an angel in a slave Leia bikini. Who can argue?
That's right. And eventually she shows up on the Guardians of the Galaxy. You can go check out that series, too. Mikey, finish us off here.
Oh, yeah. My recommendation is Damn Them All by Cy Spurrier and Charlie Adlard. And this was a 12-issue series that just wrapped up. And it is basically a guy like John Constantine dies and 72 demons are released. And his niece decides to round them all up again. So it's neat demon hunting kind of stuff. And you should read it.
Well, there you go. And some other things that you should read are all the rest of the comic books that we'll be covering on the Last Comic Shop the rest of the year. Yes, you can rate, review, and subscribe over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. And we hope you do for the rest of May, because we've got more movies. I'm not going to list all of them. You can go back and rewind to the beginning of the show. But we also got other movies this year, right? We're probably going to see Venom 3 on this show. We've got the Deadpool Wolverine movie we're going to be doing here.
Are you guys going to see the Ghostbusters?
I did see the Ghostbusters.
Is it good Ghostbusters?
It's okay. The movie Bucket is a masterpiece. They've got like a life-size Slimer with popcorn comes out of his mouth.
Oh, wonderful.
It's real good.
So it's better than the Dune Bucket?
Well, the Dune
Let's
Bucket
not talk about the Dune Bucket.
Biting my lip. Anyway, while we may be the Last Comic Shop podcast, we don't want to be the Last Comic Shop, so we encourage everybody to get out there and support your local shops. Go ahead and find those Spawn volumes 1 and 2, or any of those old back issues of Spawn you can dig up. Go and dig for Donny Cates' Venom run, that new omnibus that's out there. Maybe find Eerie Presents to get your Hunter fix. You could also look for Angela, Asgard's Assassin, or Damn Them All by Cy Spurrier and Charlie Adlard. All that and more waits for you at your local comic shop. And what waits for you at our website, J.A.?
Well, you've got links to our merch store. You can get t-shirts, tote bags, coffee mugs, and is it necroplastic armor? Whatever that armor is that Spawn has.
Necroplastic?
That's what the toys are made of these days, yeah.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Smells when you put it in the microwave. It's no good. Yeah, it's that cheap plastic.
It's anti-infant. 0 to 3 infants not allowed.
Any case, well, that's all the time we had for Last Comic Shop. Thanks so much, Mikey, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I because I never know if I'm going to watch something and think, you know what, this is better than I remember. This was not that case. But someday it might be, and I have to be open to that.
There you go.
Until next week when we got Golgo 13, both the anime movie and the manga. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith, J. Scott, and of course the reluctant Mikey Wood. And we hope that you stay safe, stay spawning, whatever that means. 100% sure.
Still don't like that.
And remember that it's movie season. Go see something good, unlike Spawn from 1997.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.